Hey there. This episode originally aired on my Patreon many months ago, so some of the information might be a little bit outdated by now. If you'd like to check out episodes as soon as they come out, you can join my $3 tier over there, or you can subscribe to check out full episodes coming here eventually. Either way, the choice is yours. Enjoy the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Pat's Creative Podcast, episode 15, I believe, if I am remembering correctly. But as you can tell, this is actually a very, very special episode because for the very first time on Pat's Creative Podcast, I am interviewing a paper bag. And it's a paper bag known as none other than Razbuten. Razbuten, would you care to introduce yourself to the people out there?
Hey, I'm the bag. Yeah. I am Razbuten. I am a YouTuber, primarily a video essayist who does largely stuff about games, but also just stuff I like in general. Like I've done a video on a musical, so it goes deep. If you know me, there's a good chance it's because of my Gaming for Non-Gaming series, which is kind of where I got my channel moving forward the most, which is where I have my wife play video games and critique how someone who didn't grow up playing video games experiences them.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of my base, I guess.
It's a very fascinating format too, by the way. It's one of those things that I'm sure you've had these things too, where you watch someone else do it and you think, oh man, I wish I thought of that because that's such a neat idea or whatnot. But yeah, obviously I'm also currently animated. That's just because we're both animated today. I figured if he's going to be animated, I want to be animated as well. And I don't have to worry about setting up a camera or anything like that. But to go into a little bit as to how I've discovered Razbuten, I will be honest in saying that I've not been, there since day one, right? But I have definitely seen you around through actually a lot of Snow's content because I've been watching Snow for quite a while now. And recently you let out a tweet saying that you were going to react to some people's videos for some honest feedback. I submitted mine on a whim, and even though I missed the stream, I woke up to finding out that you did actually do some feedback, and I very much appreciate that. Of course, now we're here talking about creative stuff. And since you kind of brought up the gaming videos specifically, because I know you have like a little bit of a wider range of other videos out there, but to kind of start with the gaming range, a lot of your videos kind of hone in on individuals' experiences with specific games, even if it's like your wife's or your own. And you also talk a lot about like the more minuscule aspects of games, to questioning whether or not they're even worth it, right? Like questioning just game design in general. Would you say that there's a general goal that these videos kind of aim towards? Is it something about almost trying to better an industry? Is it just voicing concerns that you've had or venting frustrations? Like, would you say all your videos play into any kind of particular outcome you're hoping for?
That's a good question. I think largely they start as a way for me to better understand games, and I play a game and then I feel a certain way, right?
Sure.
And I could just feel that way and not think about it.
Right.
I could be like, this game made me, I didn't enjoy this, and I could walk away and say this game bad. But instead, like, I think it starts with wanting to figure out like, what is the centerpiece that is making me either enjoy a thing or not enjoy a thing.
Right.
So I think that's part of it. I also think with each of my videos, I'm trying to put energy out into the universe to have my perfect game be designed by someone,
Sure.
Because I'm not a designer, so I don't have the skills yet, or probably ever to make a great game.
But there's like that idea of a perfect game out there that you're kind of hoping you can contribute towards through videos and having people have a better understanding of design.
Yeah. And I think also just with the Gaming for Non-Gamer series specifically, which is so much about the perspective of someone who is very outside of the gaming space,
Right.
The idea of that is, looking at accessibility, and looking at like who games are made for, and is that okay still, because I think some of the things I bring up in those videos are very like, it's hard to say that the issues that non-gamers have or that my wife has while playing a game is like a flaw with a game, right?
Sure.
it's not designed for her. It's not designed for non-gamers.
Right.
But I think there's plenty of non-gamers that want to get into it. So it's like, how?
Right.
How do
right.
you figure out how to do it if most modern games are just not designed for
Right.
them?
So you're
And
kind
then-
of raising awareness of between different demographics and trying to build bridges between them, trying to kind of unify it.
Yeah, I suppose so. I don't know that I've thought about it in
Sure.
those terms, but it sounds really nice.
In a perfect world, that does sound
Yeah.
very nice. Yes. So then, when you go about making your videos, do you usually? You said that you like usually find something small and then you want to actually think about it and figure out why you feel a certain reaction to it. Is do you think that's where the initial like spark of inspiration comes from, just through randomly playing and finding a certain mechanic that you're like, this would be something to talk about on a broader level? Or where do you think in general your inspiration comes from for these videos?
It depends. I think it's changed throughout the years as I've gone from like this being a hobby to this being a profession.
Right.
Because now I'm kind of like, well, I need a video or two every month.
Sure.
So that kind of changes the focus at times, not all the time.
Right.
But certainly there's times where I'm like, well, I need a video. I don't necessarily have like an idea I'm super passionate about, but here are some things I could talk about. So, in those cases, it's kind of like, just like I need to keep my creative wheels moving instead of trying to always focus for that like gem. This is going to be my best
Right.
video,
Yeah. You can't wait for like once in a lifetime inspiration to strike every month, right? You kind of have to be looking for something.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to make a video on Among Us because it's just whatever. You enjoyed the game enough and you have some thoughts about it. It's not going to be a video you look back on in 3 years and be like, this was my best work. This was really inspired. But like it keeps you writing, it keeps you editing, like it keeps
Right.
those
Creeps.
skills moving forward.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. It's like exercising your creative muscles regardless. Yeah. And even like with the Among Us one, well, obviously Among Us is a pretty trendy thing, or at least was at the time. I don't know if it still is. I'm not super in the loop. But, I appreciate that you still found kind of an area of the game that not a ton of people discuss about. You can still find something that's not often brought up, specifically with the deception between people, right? So I think there's something to be said about that of you taking these smaller aspects of games, but then showing them in a more applicable light, something that's as putting it more meaning to it in a way. And I think that's what's really cool about your videos that makes you stand out over a lot of other creators. But as you mentioned, you still upload about once a month, right? And now that's not the most infrequent schedule, right? There's some channels that take much longer.
No, yeah.
But I'm curious, what do you think are the biggest reasons for the time in between uploads? Do you find like that you have trouble like sticking with projects? Do you find that you procrastinate a lot? Or do you find that you just want to make sure you're like a perfectionist in a sense, where you want to make sure everything is very tied up?
I think probably the last one. It's also just like a need, right? Like I only need to make the amount of videos I make,
Right.
And I feel like I work a lot of hours, to get what I get out because I try to focus a lot on writing something well,
Sure.
and writing it from a perspective that's interesting. And then, I think I focus a lot. I mean, that's the step that takes the longest, right? Is brainstorming an idea and writing an idea.
Right.
Because I think my favorite videos that I make, kind of going back to the first thing you had asked, is like I have a thought and then I can't stop thinking about it, and then I see examples of it everywhere. So an example of a video that was like that is my color of corruption, which is about like how the color purple is used in video games, oftentimes as like a corruptive force.
Right.
It's like I saw that I was playing Ori in the Will of the Wisp, and I saw that being used a lot. And I was like, these other games do that too. And like I just kept playing other games and be like, wow, all these games are using the same thing, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. So then I played a bunch of games for research. I read a lot of articles about purple throughout history, you know, and then wrote the piece. So like stuff like that it just takes a while, even though it's a 10-minute video, right? It's just like a lot of work went into making it an interesting idea and moving it forward. So it's like I could put out more stuff pretty easily. I mean, it's easy to put out stuff, right?
Right.
Maybe not great stuff, but it's easy enough to do it.
You click a button and then you wait for a loading bar to happen, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I want to be largely happy with what I put out.
Sure.
And make something that I want to watch. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like I end up putting a lot of time into these things because I like being involved in different parts of the creative process. I put a lot of time just because I want to make sure I do it right.
Sure.
And yeah, also, I don't know. I've had a fair bit of success.
Sure.
With the schedule I'm on. And I know that if I made more videos and uploaded more, I'd be more successful. Probably. That's usually how it goes. Because at a point when you have an audience big enough, consistency is more important than creativity. And that's something I've heard lots of people say. And obviously, if I just started uploading daily content, people would be like, what are you doing?
Right.
But that general idea, you know, if I was uploading a video a week or a video every 2 weeks, YouTube would like my channel and the algorithm more, you know, my subs would be more engaged and all these things. So I'm like, I could be more successful, but I'm also like pretty dang happy where I'm at. So I think that's probably part of it too. Not to say I don't ever procrastinate.
Sure.
I certainly do that.
And do you find like in the brainstorming process, you might find that an idea just won't work for a certain video? Like, have you had to scrap any projects because of that?
Yeah. So like the Among Us idea, the Among Us video, to keep coming back to that, actually was a script I had mostly written like 4 years ago. When like different
not on Among Us
based games,
right?
Not on Among Us.
Okay.
Yeah, not on Among Us. It was about like it was largely about like the Resistance, if you've ever played that game.
I love the Resistance.
Secret Hitler in those games,
right?
So a lot of the ideas from that I moved over to the Among Us idea because I was like, oh, it works now.
Yeah,
like because Among Us addressed a few of the things that I felt like was missing from that script,
right?
And I was like, oh, this was the piece. So yeah, I've certainly had things that I've either shelved for actual years before bringing back around,
right?
And then yeah, I don't know, I can't think of a lot of stuff recently that I've scrapped.
Sure.
Or at least that I've scrapped like after working on a bunch. I certainly have just a doc of ideas,
right,
that I could make at any time, and sometimes I'll be thinking about ideas more, and then sometimes I'll put them to the side.
Sure. But. Okay. And for many of your videos nowadays, you have an editor, is that correct?
Say like a third.
Okay.
I think I'm trying to think. So I put out 16 videos in 2020. Yeah. I think of the 16 videos, I edited 10 of them.
Okay. So, that's interesting. So you have an editor, but they're not for every video. Did you kind of have like any concerns when coming to the decision of hiring an editor with regards to like just ownership or trying to present your thoughts through someone else's medium in a sense? Like, has that something that's ever been concerned you? And is that why you still edit some of your own videos, or what's kind of the thought process behind that?
So yeah, the first time I ever did stuff with an editor was like 2017.
Right.
A friend of mine, Jesse Grasha, and I were originally going to start like a collabed channel. That was going to be in the realm of like Vox stuff. It was going to kind of feel like what Vox was doing at the time.
Sure.
Because we really liked that editing style. And the way that they tackled subjects. And we made like 2 or 3 videos where like I was typically the writer and he would do the editing for them, but he also did some of the writing too, on one of the ideas. And we hit a point where we're like, yeah, we don't have time for this. Like,
Sure.
we were both working jobs outside of YouTube. We were like, okay. But that was the first time I'd worked with someone who like edited things I wrote.
Right.
And those videos ended up being like transitioning to stuff that both of us posted on our own channels. And then, yeah, I got a little traction on the Razbuten channel after a while.
And by then you were pretty accustomed to that collaborative form of work.
Yeah. I mean, I think it definitely felt weird when it first happened.
Sure. Right.
Just because you very much like have, I think early on, especially in creation, there are a lot of there's like this journeyman feel, right? Like everyone wants to be like, I do everything. I have complete control, and there's value in this because I've done every part of it.
And you've already mentioned that you like your videos to be perfect. You like to have like, you hold a certain standard for your own videos. So it's hard to not entirely nitpick what other people are doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think though, I came to a point, and I've worked with a few different editors, just in general, whoever has availability for freelance stuff pretty much.
Right.
And what I've come to realize is all the people I've worked with are better at editing than I am.
Yes.
I think I'm fine.
Sure.
I can have a very clean look that flows well. But as far as making cool transitions, doing any sort of After Effects animation, and also just having a vision.
Yeah.
There's just a vision some editors have.
Definitely.
That it's just like they'll have an idea and then they'll be like, I've made this idea.
Yeah.
I'll be like, I did a cross dissolve. So
yeah, I felt the exact same way when I interviewed Lee, because he's like a master editor. He's just someone who's almost perfected that craft. And when I see like his videos and I compare it to my own, it's like I no longer feel like I'm an extremely good editor, right? And obviously it's there's always people in the industry who's better than you. It's just when you see people who's a editor by trade or a graphic designer by trade or whatnot, and you look at it and you compare it to your own, you can't help but feel like, oh, maybe this is not my particular trade, right? So when you hired an editor, at some point you basically felt like they almost know how to handle this video better than I do with regards to the editing process.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly part of it. I think at this point, it's also just about time.
Sure.
I have a lot of things I like to do, and I only have so much time to do them.
Sure.
So while yes, a benefit of hiring an editor for something is like they can do things that I can't.
Right.
And bring things to life in a way that I can't. It's also just like, well, I don't have time this week to spend 40 hours editing this video or whatever.
Because video making's not your only creative outlet, right? You also work with some D&D stuff, and you have a couple other mediums too, correct?
Yeah. I mean, so I play D&D casually. I've also I tried running a D&D podcast. Something I'd like to come back to, but that's just one of those things where it's like I only have so much time.
Sure.
And trying to get that out regularly makes it so it's a lot harder to get normal videos out regularly. Right. So it's always a competition of time. And now that this is like my job, it is my source of income.
Right.
And not just a hobby. Like I have to think about it like in those terms.
Sure. Yeah.
where any time that I'm not working on Razbuten stuff, that could be potentially harmful down the line.
And I'm sure it would be another case if you had a job that wasn't in creating and your hobby was like running D&D campaigns or whatnot, because that would become your creative outlet. But when you're already creating for your job, I feel like it's almost harder to entirely balance every kind of creative avenue when you have to focus specifically on one, at least to my understanding.
Yeah, I'd say so to a degree. I think also, especially with the D&D podcast that I was doing, is like when I started viewing D&D as something I could make, some capital C content with.
I like that, capital C content. That's good. I want to use that.
and just viewing it in those terms, I found it a lot harder to just play D&D for fun. So I'm kind of also in this spot where I'm like, yeah, I liked working on that podcast because I think it made a really cool creative product,
right?
And it was fun to do. And also, like, yeah, I think if I was able to keep with it enough, it could be something that, maybe at some point, like, doesn't take up so much. Like, I hopefully it could pay for itself or something.
Right.
Just make enough where I can just run a game and be able to hire someone to edit it and put it out, and if it breaks even, that'd be great.
Sure.
Because then at least it gets to exist, and that would be really exciting for me. But at the same time, when I'm thinking about D&D as like something that other people will watch,
right?
Then that makes it so whenever I'm running a personal game, I have to think of like, well, would these ideas I'm using be good content in the podcast? Should I be wasting my stuff in this group of just 4 people?
Yeah.
There's only 4 people playing, so that means there's only 4 people watching. And it's like, I hate that. Like I hate that I'm doing that to this hobby that I have that I love and love to do.
Sure.
And the value of that hobby is not how many other people are watching it or engaging with it, but once you start to maybe try to monetize your hobby or just have it be like a thing that is put out to the public for people to watch.
You can't entirely turn off the performance of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can't.
I'm sure you've felt that way with streaming too, right? Where sometimes when you're playing games, you kind of kick yourself for even just doing commentary in your head while you're playing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think to a degree, I think how I stream has shifted a lot. I think a lot of people who start with a YouTube channel and go over to streaming are like, all right, I play games.
Right.
This is my channel. I play games. I need to play games to get ideas for stuff, and I need to capture footage for stuff.
Sure.
So if I just stream that'll be great, and people will want to watch it.
Sure.
And that works for some people.
Right.
Not for everyone, though.
Definitely not.
I think it's hard to make it on Twitch doing that. Because people on Twitch at this point really only watch games if you're really funny, which I'm not, or if you're really good at them.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I'm also not. So I'm 0 for 2 in the video game realm.
Sure.
So I've had to actually find ideas that are just outside of it, right? So the whole feedback stream was kind of I stole that from bigger streamers who do that sort of thing.
Sure.
I was like, that'd be a fun idea. Those I hadn't seen anyone really do that with video essay stuff. The stuff that streamer was critiquing was mostly like other people's stream content.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, I was kind of like, okay, but you do this with video essays, give my feedback to the best of my ability.
Because you have that insight and experience with video essays specifically, something that is often considered one of like the highest form of YouTube content, right? Like the idea of like something super scripted, edited well, and has a neat point from the beginning to the end. And you saw like, okay, if I'm not inherently funny, which you might be funnier than you imagine. Okay, I'm just saying, big C or capital C content was pretty good. And then, of course, not being great at games, you still have some kind of experience that you can rely on, and turning that into content seems like a good idea. And actually, as of today, you are now a Twitch partner too. So I assume that you're going to be going a little heavier with streams as well.
Yeah, we'll see. I think I've had fun trying to figure out what would be good ideas for Twitch stuff.
Right.
Because for a while I was just like, I'll just use it to play games. And I wasn't seeing a ton of growth. And then I figured like different ways, like, okay, instead of just playing games, do a challenge, right? Beat Path of Pain in Hollow Knight, or defeat the Sans boss fight. Like these things that are kind of hard that people really like to watch others struggle with,
Sure.
have that be the focus instead of it being like, here's my playthrough of Subnautica, which actually people liked that when I played that game because it's a good game. But, it's just, there's a lot more downtime in something like that,
right.
whereas you can kind of keep the energy up a lot more.
And have you dabbled in any like Let's Play experience with just regular video gameplay format, or?
No, not really.
Okay.
I the closest thing is for the gaming for non-gamer stuff. I record those entire sessions.
Sure.
And I've sometimes cut those up to one of them is on the channel of just like a best of clips.
Sure.
From my wife's playthroughs, and yeah, I've just cut up some other videos of that stuff that I put on like Patreon and whatnot. So that's the closest thing, but those really aren't Let's Plays because there's so much like dead air and there's so much like us talking about taxes,
right.
We are not ever recording that. Like we are recording it for the moments that I can use in the videos.
Right.
And not for the whole thing to be an entertaining sort of Let's Play.
And do you think transitioning to streaming as opposed to Let's Playing is almost easier because it's something where viewers go in for the sake of long-term content, for the sake of sitting down for a long time and watching something? Like, does that give you any kind of ease or comfort?
I think so. I think it's the value of streaming, I think for a lot of people, is the direct connection.
Sure.
For better or worse. In the YouTube and Twitch era, parasocial relationships are ultimately what makes
the platform
creators
viable.
Popular, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
So I think people go to Twitch for that interaction, and I think I'm a pretty chat reliant streamer.
Sure.
I try to keep up with chat, respond to chat. And I've been trying to find more ways to include chat, right?
Yeah.
Like I've been running, you said you had Leon here,
right?
Kind of co-opting an idea from the Normal Boots guys of their Madness series. I've been running these brackets of different topics.
Right.
Obviously they invented brackets,
Yes. Yeah. I believe if you look up brackets on Wikipedia, their names come up. Yes.
But yeah. I always liked any sort of competition like that. At any time that you see like, I don't know. I remember a few years ago there was like, I think a big one of just like the best games ever, and it started at like 128, and then people would vote on it. Every week and new stuff would come out.
Right.
I just love stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think it's a fun format that gets people excited. So I've been doing that where then, I'll have matchups and then have chat vote on who should move on.
Right.
So just finding ways to like include people. And I think that's what people like about Twitch that doesn't exist with a Let's Play is they are part of,
the development
of content, right?
Yeah. And it's really fascinating that that's the part you like about Twitch, when that's also an aspect that makes D&D so much fun, or at least specifically being a dungeon master, because it is almost in a sense a collaborative art that you're performing, because you are building things based off the decisions of the players, just like in streaming you are acting depending on the decisions of the chat, right? So that interactivity can be found in both.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting that you specifically bring up the idea of madness, because I spent quite a bit of time on Lee's podcast talking about that, and I am also currently working on another ripoff, of the idea. So that's when you know you have a really good idea, when there's multiple people just being like, I want to do something like that. But yeah, no, just to kind of go back to D&D a little bit though, like what do you think? Because you seem very interested in game design on your channel and whatnot, and obviously D&D involves a lot of game design. Do you think that the game designing aspects of D&D is something you prefer the most, or do you think it's more building a world or building a story or building characters? Like, what do you think is the most fascinating part about being a dungeon master?
Yeah, so I mean, I am an English major.
Okay.
Which means that I have somehow fallen into the perfect career of writing essays,
Yes.
which is just one for one what I did in college.
Right.
But yeah, I got an English degree with high hopes of becoming, the next great American author, as all of us do.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, I like writing fiction. To jokes aside, yeah, I like to write fiction. I like short stories a lot. And when I graduated, that's what I was writing a ton. Like I just would every day write 1,000 words, Stephen King style, and make short stories and all these different things. And I found it was very hard to get anyone to read them.
Interesting.
As it turns out, like there's not a huge demand on the internet for those things.
Right.
In certain places. I mean, you have to format it to certain things. I could probably find a subreddit like, what's it called? r/no sleep, right? That's all just horror stories
Sure.
and whatnot. I could write stuff probably specifically for that and get some traction. And maybe that's, what I should have done. But, it isn't what I did.
Sure.
And this is also why I started a YouTube channel is I was like, well, I want people to react to my writing and give me feedback on my writing.
Right.
And they're more likely to do it through watching a YouTube video than here's my 20-page short story about
Please read and bring notes.
yeah.
Right.
So that's why I started that. To transition to D&D stuff, D&D is essentially you are telling your short stories or long stories. Yeah, I've been running a campaign for like 70 plus sessions.
Sure.
So it's pretty long at this point.
Right.
And the 3 to 6 people playing are the most engaged audience you can think of.
That is a fascinating way to look at it. Yeah. Definitely.
They because I mean they're part of it,
right?
So they feel invested because of their characters, and they might view the story different than you do, and that's okay. Any audience is going to do that,
right?
But I think that was a big appeal for me. Is like I'm essentially putting my writing out,
right,
and seeing their reactions to it in real time, and seeing their reactions to it in the personal relationships that they've made to the characters, both their own and each other's and the ones I've created. So that's always been I think a big draw to me is it gives me that feedback that I've always wanted, right?
Not only do you have a captive audience, you have a captive audience who are voluntarily captive, right? Mm-hmm, oh man, that's such an interesting way to look at it. I never thought of like specifically seeing the players as an audience who are like super engaged in the work that you are currently making right in front of them. Like that's such a great way to look at it. Mm-hmm. It makes me excited just to play D&D again. Yeah. Hey, but you kind of said some interesting stuff about writing though. Do you find that you read a lot of books still? Like, are you an active reader, or do you find that you enjoy stories told through more digital mediums or whatnot?
I think I used to be an active reader.
Okay.
I feel like since my channel has turned into my job,
right,
I have read a lot less. So for kind of I guess the past year and a half, I feel like and it might just be my free time and how I use my free time, but yeah, my reading time has been greatly diminished, unfortunately. But yeah, before that, I'd say I was a pretty active reader.
Right. And do you have a preference for how books are consumed? Like, do you prefer to read them directly from a page, or do you like listening to audiobooks, or do you have anything against audiobooks or anything against reading on page?
No, I have nothing against either. I'd say I like to read books on page if I'm reading them for the first time.
Okay.
Just because I feel like when I listen to something on an audiobook, a lot of time I'm doing something else as well.
Right.
It's not like I'm just like, when you're reading a book, that's all you're doing.
Yeah.
You can't be
If you're doing much
typing
more, it's
something.
quite
Yeah.
impressive.
And I don't like just sitting there and listening to an audiobook and staring out. So
Right.
I'm usually doing something else,
Yeah.
whether it be like playing a game that's sort of mindless just to get footage,
Sure.
or whatever it is. So I feel like sometimes because of that, though, I'll miss something, miss a sentence that's important, or
Right.
just have less focus.
And you can't
So when
easily
it's
go
something-
back to it if you miss something.
Yeah. So when it's something I haven't read before, I want to give it my entire focus, which I just
Right.
won't if I listen to it on an audiobook.
Sure.
With that said, re-listening to stuff, I love that. Like, I will probably not read a book a second time, but I will listen to it
Yeah.
on audiobook.
I think that
like,
makes sense, though.
Over and over.
Yeah, because if you already know what's going to happen, being able to like kind of predict it, like the next line as you're listening to it, it feels like it's almost like it's also just a different medium of sharing the story. It's similar to like listening to a musical soundtrack and then going back and watching the play, or vice versa, right? Being able to just indulge in different mediums, but also, as you mentioned, like you could do other things while you're listening to it. But audiobooks is kind of a medium designed for multitasking, so that you can work on something while you listen to other things. But yeah, like you said, if you like miss certain things, or just even the amount of time it takes, you can read a lot quicker than someone can narrate typically, right? Unless I'm wrong on that.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some reasons for actual books, but do you find that you almost like your experience of listening to an audiobook while doing something else shapes the actual experience of the book, like might change your feelings towards it in a way? Because I or even just vice versa, to where like if you're playing games while listening to an audiobook, does it change your experience when playing a game to the point where maybe you like it more or less or something? Like, have you noticed any like specific emotional or feeling difference between the two mediums?
I mean, I can't think of a ton of examples of like things that are cemented in my head of like I was playing X game and
Right.
whatever audiobook I was listening to is now directly connected to it. I have that with other things in life, right? Like I have a vivid memory of me playing Super Mario Galaxy, where my like mom gave me some news about our family, like this stuff like that. So
Sure.
I have those connections, not necessarily with audiobooks. The closest thing I can think of is growing up, like I would listen to the Harry Potter books on tape when I went to bed. So I
Right.
guess listening to that makes me tired. That's the closest thing.
Okay, interesting.
I can get to.
But it's similar to like when you hear music at a like a happy moment in your life, and then you hear it again, and it makes you all nostalgic. Or sometimes sad moments of your life, you hear music popular at the time, and then when you re-listen to it, it's crazy. But you don't find that to be super effective with books, because in books you're just
Not
too
as much,
involved
yeah.
in the narrative and whatnot to really take in the surroundings.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay, gotcha. Now, the question is, when are we getting the famous Razbuten YouTuber book? Because, YouTubers make books,
I hope one day I do write a book.
Okay. I was going to say, I could rephrase the question because that wasn't actually the question, but no, let's let you continue.
It will not, the name Razbuten will not be attached to it. I suppose it would be stupid not to use my platform to promote it, I guess. But yeah, it will not be like a
YouTuber book.
Jake Paul's book of stories.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And have you, so like, do you find yourself nitpicking a lot of other people's narratives, similar to how you kind of, I mean, nitpicking has a negative connotation. I don't mean it in that sense though, but kind of nitpicking games and stuff like that. Do you find you do the same thing towards narratives, where you take apart small little aspects and you wish that they fixed it? Or do you feel that like when watching movies or something, like do you find yourself almost borderline cynical when it comes to certain critiques towards narratives?
I used to be.
Okay.
I think I've shifted a bit in how I feel. I mean, I certainly can look at a story and consider like, all right, I think this was effective and this wasn't, and if I had written it, these are the changes that I would make. And I think it might be more effective.
Sure.
And, try to find a way to explain that other than this is just what I'd prefer.
Right.
I think as time has gone on and as I've seen more very extreme reactions to different stories,
Right.
especially over the last like 2-3 years, I just hit a point where I have to be like, well, there's a reason that people connect to a certain story.
Yes.
And really trying to find like what it is that people connect to. And then still thinking like, yeah, this is what I would have liked to see, but is what I would have liked to see more valuable than what you would have liked to see?
Right.
And that doesn't mean I'll never talk about it. Like I find that fun. I do find that fun.
Sure.
Like coming up with ideas of how I could get a story to work or how I would approach it.
Right.
But I've certainly, I wouldn't say cynicism is tied to it at all.
Right.
For me at this point, where it definitely used to be. It definitely used to be like, wow, story bad.
Right.
They should listen to me, random YouTube man.
I've definitely like had that kind of transition as well. I used to think a lot more about this, an idea of like, this is the perfect narrative that these stories have to be or whatnot, without, like you said, fully appreciating why other people's connect with it. But at some point, figuring out why other people connect with it is almost more fun than just reaffirming what you already know and why it doesn't connect with you, right? So I ended up finding more enjoyment in just trying to understand and appreciate why other people enjoy those angles, because I already know my angles super well and I don't know their angles, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel that way with some Marvel movies sometimes. It's not really movies that are made towards me, and I used to be a lot more cynical about it. I used to think like, well, these are trash, they're fundamentally flawed and stuff like that, which is just an unnecessary way to think, right? Unnecessary cynicism. But yeah, I think by now I've better understood that people have different angles when it comes to things. And what about like videos as well? Like, do you find it like if you watch other people's video essays or any kind of digital content, really, do you find it like almost like as a fun creative exercise to kind of rework it in your head, similar to what you do with narratives, or do you think it's just a kind of different feeling when watching other people on YouTube specifically?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, I mean, at this point, like, I know people.
Right.
And I've always known people, right? Like, and it's been at different levels. But, you get to, when you start making essays, you get to know people in the community of all different channel sizes and focuses.
Right.
You can have conversations with them in different ways. And, like, it feels... And it's usually how channels work is it's like, maybe there's a team behind it,
Sure.
but it's usually a person at the forefront.
Right.
So I always do. I don't know. Where with a movie, it's easy to be like, okay, well, there's always like a studio you can play.
Right.
You know what I mean?
There's always a company or a set of finance that you can totally point towards. While with creators, it feels almost too mutual, do you think?
Yeah. And maybe there's some hypocrisy there that I should examine at some point. But I don't know. I think I certainly can watch a video and feel no issue responding with like, yeah, I agree with this take of yours because of this, or I disagree with your take because of this. But I don't find myself being super critical of
like the formalities of like how it's set up.
Yeah.
Stuff. Right. Yeah. Well,
I
sorry, go for
personally,
it.
I try not to give criticism on a channel in terms of like how they're making stuff.
Right.
Unless they ask for it.
Right.
Like if they ask like, how could I do this differently? Then I'll offer things. But I don't know. I think if you just like, if I were just to leave comments being like, hey, yeah, I mean, I'm not an asshole, so I wouldn't do it in a mean way. But even if I did it in a nice way of just leaving a comment being like, hey, appreciate what you're doing here. Keep up the good work. Here are some things I would work on going forward. The person who made that didn't ask for it,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And that's why I started doing the feedback streams, is because like it's people who specifically want feedback.
Right.
They're asking for me to look and give my perspective on it.
And like 9 times out of 10, feedback that comes from results of that, of people literally asking for it, are going to be like usually not only perceived better, but also listened to a lot more, right? Than just random comments on your video. If you get random comment on your video, sometimes you think, what does this guy know? He might know everything.
Exactly.
But the way you receive it's going to be different.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, you're going to receive it in a way where you want to hear it. And maybe you'll hear some things you don't want to hear, and that's okay.
Right.
That's how it goes.
That is.
But at the same time, it's just like, yeah, you're definitely right. You'll be in the headspace where you'll be more receptive to it. Whereas like if I put out a video and I'm feeling great about it, and then someone leaves a 5,000 word comment being like, structurally your essay is flawed because, you know, it's like, you know, what value does this bring to me?
Right.
And there could be valuable things in there,
Right.
but also YouTube being the way it is, you could get a 5,000 word essay saying why your essay was the greatest thing ever, or another one saying why it was utterly trash.
And you're going to remember
so you have to like
the bottom one. You're going to remember.
Sure. You're going to remember the bottom one for sure. But you can still, you know, get these very wide responses from different people. And it's like, yeah, is who should I listen to? Whose opinion matters more? And I think your point of what you just said of you'll remember the negative one, that is what people normally do.
Right.
You can get 100 positive comments, and if someone, you know, says you're an idiot, that is the one you'll remember.
Right, for sure.
the 100 are gone, and this person sees a truth about you that only you thought you could see, but they see it too, which means your armor is cracked, and you're a fraud. And they know. And I think what's hard is it's really easy to hyperfixate on highly negative, highly critical comments. And then I think a thing that a lot of smaller creators fall into, and bigger creators do too, is following the advice of people who don't like them or what they make.
Or even just people who disagree with opinions. You know, so many formal critiques, even if they're correct critiques, you know, will come from people just being upset by a specific opinion the creator had, and not actually upset by the low quality formalities, right? But that's what sparks the comment a lot of times. And then, yeah, like you said, just a lot of people listen to that, and they try to capitalize on those specific points, when all the pats on the back, those are, you know, suddenly they're nothing, that you don't even think of them, you know?
Yeah. And again, it's not to say that critical comments never have truths in them and that they can never help you. But I think there is certainly an overcorrection where, well, this one person didn't like what I did. These 100 people did, but they're sheep. They don't know.
Right.
Which I think creators are very bad at like sifting through feedback sometimes.
Well, we didn't have any, you know, YouTube classes. It's not like, you know, a lot of people don't even have like any kind of art background when they go into YouTube, right? Especially nowadays, you know, because like, you know, YouTube wasn't around when I was born. Nowadays, people are born where YouTube is around, and they're going to continue to have opportunities to create without having, because, you know, in other art forms, and I'm sure as an English major, you had to take at least at some point have a portion of a class, or even if not a whole class, dedicated to just taking critique, right? And being able to funnel in what's important, what's not important. You know, a lot of people just don't have that background, so they're kind of prone to just emotionally reacting to whatever comments are thrown towards them. But yeah, no, I you know, it's like the old saying, like a pat on the back is going to be remembered a lot less than a stab in the back, right? If you feel a wound, you're going to feel that much longer. But you know, another thing is just that if you make video essays like yourself, and you release something that you spent like an entire month working on, and then someone's upset about specific formal qualities, suddenly it makes you feel like they're degrading the whole video just to the faults that they think you have, which is problematic because obviously there's so much more to the video than that, especially with something like a video essay, right?
Yeah, I think even a more narrow look at that, the worst comments out there are ones that focus on like something you say, that something that takes up 3 seconds of the essay.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I can't believe he liked this game.
Right. Yeah.
He said Zelda 2 was actually good. Oh my God, this video essay is invalidated.
Right.
You know, and yeah, that sort of comment can be tough too, because it's like, man, I spent a month making this. I did a ton of research. There's a train going by the way, so we'll have a little atmospheric.
That's okay.
Background
I like
noise.
special guests. We had a cat on last time, so you know.
Nice. But yeah, it's that feeling of like, I put everything I had into this,
Right.
and you're responding to the most mundane aspect about this video.
Yeah.
That isn't the focus. It has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
But that's your takeaway.
It just
It's like,
some
dang.
random opinion they happen to disagree with. But you know, there's no stakes for commenters, you know. And just
No, of course
like
not.
any messages on the internet in general, you could just post something and you don't have any worries about repercussion, or even it's even hard to just fully like understand that like you're having discourse with someone because you don't see their face and they don't see yours. So naturally you're just thinking like you're the thought doesn't even cross your mind of actually hurting people for the most part. You know, you have to really train yourself to actually think about the other person on the other side, because we're used to just seeing a bunch of messages and whatnot. But yeah, you know, I mean, comment ideology and the problems with text-based communication over the internet and online personalities, that could cover its whole podcast, right? And I don't mean to stay on it forever. But one thing I did kind of want to get into, since you brought up maybe a long time ago now, I don't remember, but I wanted to ask about it, is you were talking about how you just get to know a lot of other creators or whatnot. Who were some of just your inspiring artists when you started making videos? That time I heard it. I heard it that time.
This train, yeah. It's coming close. Before it was just in the distance,
Right.
where maybe only I could hear it.
Do you have to
and my
jump out of the
microphone
way?
wouldn't
Like,
pick it
is it gonna get you?
I just had to. There was a maiden tied up that I had to pick up and carry off of it from
okay.
some dastardly evil man.
Right. Watch Pat's creative podcast for Razbuten's famous train hit. Only here.
Exactly. Yeah. Some of my influences. Yeah. So I started, I think, like pathing my getting into YouTube track. As much of a millennial as I am, it's the Zoomer way of Minecraft is what got me into it. I don't know. I heard about Minecraft. I watched a video by this guy called X's
No
Adventure
kidding.
in
Yeah,
Minecraft.
I'm aware. I also got into YouTube through Minecraft, so I know some of the
Yeah.
OGs.
And then I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And that introduced me to Let's Plays, where like from there I moved on to some of the stuff Rooster Teeth was doing. And then from there I moved into Game Grumps stuff. So I a huge early inspiration for sure was Ego Raptor.
Right.
In terms of like, oh, you can do this, and you can be funny and talk about things.
Right.
So yeah, going back to my very early content, or my very early videos, I think I do a decent job of somewhat hiding my inspirations. But definitely, I was trying to use game discussions as a path to comedy.
Sure.
Which I think was the wrong take, because I think I have a lot more to give to game discussions than comedy.
Right.
I think as I've gone on, I've kind of flipped that, where like, comedy, when I do use it, which is relatively sparingly, but a few dry comments here and there throughout videos, like that's just to help push forward the ideas and not have it be completely dry.
Right.
So now I use comedy as a way to, when I do, to push forward my ideas on games, where before or early on it was very much the opposite. And I think if you look back to the older guard, right, your PBGs,
Right.
and folks like that, like so much of it is, I mean, yeah, if you I think Peanut Butter Game is a great example of that. Is like, especially his early top tens, like they're funny. Like
Right.
that's what they're for. Is like they're meant to be funny,
Right.
and it's using games as a vehicle to tell
Exactly, yeah.
jokes. What he says about games isn't the focus. It's never meant to be. So yeah, I think a lot of my early stuff kind of reflects that, because that's what I was like, this is what stuff should be.
Right.
But then I think over time, I kind of took a closer look at what Ego Raptor had done with the Sequelitis series and been like, this isn't about the comedy. Like, there are funny jokes in it,
Right.
but the comedy is,
It's aiding the bigger picture.
yeah. So yeah, transition some from there. I think, I think Ego Raptor, and I imagine a lot of people who started around the same time as me, a big influence
Definitely.
for me. And then as time went on, I think Mark Brown, it's hard not to be influenced by the dude at this point. Just consistently, Game Maker's Toolkit is put it
Right.
out. Great essay after great essay.
Right.
And raising the bar.
Yeah.
I think Mark came out and it was like, okay, oh, I see you. All right, gotta improve what I'm
it's
doing.
It's borderline intimidating to even talk about game design when you see some of those videos.
And then I think I took a lot of inspiration from Nerdwriter too. I think Nerdwriter, obviously, like the biggest video essay OG ever, right?
Right.
Just the original video essay guy, pioneered that format, and I think I definitely got into his work and learned a lot from that.
Sure.
So yeah, I'd say the order, I guess, probably was the first big inspiration was Ego Raptor, then Nerdwriter,
Right.
then Mark Brown. Also, like a lot of smaller channels that I've had the pleasure to become friends with have inspired me a lot. Wizawat, who's putting stuff out, he used to put stuff out under a different channel, and it's now putting out new stuff that's great. But watching his early stuff and having conversations with him about things in video essays helped me a ton. Heavy Eyed has been the same sort of way.
Right.
I'd mentioned earlier Jesse Grasha, who's done editing for me. He had a channel that made me think about things a lot differently.
Right.
And you mentioned Snowman Gaming.
Right.
He in our group, because I've kind of had a handful of people that I've been lucky enough to have in my sphere for a while.
Right.
And Snow was always like the big channel out of us. Even when he had like 5,000 subs, I'm like, oh, Snow's channel is so massive in comparison.
Right.
Which 5,000 is a ton. It's just all about perspective, and interesting to see how massive we viewed his channel then, and now he's at like 240,000 subs.
Right.
It's just so interesting to see.
Yeah.
How our view of him has not changed, even though his channel has changed so much. But he inspired me a ton. His good game design series definitely, I think, was a big inspiration for me to do like topic-based essays instead of like, I'm going to talk about Mega Man X.
Right. Well, and I think that's what's really interesting is just how much like inspiring artists we pull from when in to make some kind of big collective of these random thoughts and ideas and inspirations we pulled from so many different people. And you can like chart back specific things where it's like, oh, I saw Snow do this, which kind of influenced this small little change in how I approach content. And then I'm sure like you could chart stuff back to other creators as well, because we all take these tiny little aspects from specific ideas just to make our own thing. And I very much feel that you definitely have your own creative voice too, though, and you're not just another creator, right? And I think it's tough. when you're first starting off because you see the channels that you like and you immediately want to recreate exactly what they're doing. But over time, as you see a lot more creators, you're able to really find where your preferences lie and where you think you can create the best possible thing in your own style. And I think you've been able to do that. So
thank you. Thank you.
And on that note, we're actually close to wrapping up, so I'm going to kind of finish off with the question that I usually ask everybody, which is, of course, Razbuten, how have you been creatively dealing with everything that's been going on in 2020? I don't mean to pry into any personal things, but specifically, have you felt more creatively inspired, less creatively inspired? Have you been consuming more content or consuming less content? What's been your overall effect by everything going on?
Definitely less creatively inspired. I think it's been harder to create stuff for a handful of reasons. I mean, general anxiety. All right,
sure.
Like I am already someone prone to a lot of anxiety, so I think to have this elevated state of just a lot of uncertainty and unrest and not having the same sort of outlets of like, hey, let's go grab a beer with friends, having those be gone kind of gives less valves to blow off steam from.
Right.
And I find myself like then being like, well, I guess I'll work more. But I don't, so I think I've been working more, but I don't know that I've been more creatively inspired, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay.
It might sound backwards, but like
no,
I
think that makes sense. Like it's because you have in a way more time to work because of this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're having more sparks than ever, right? And the reason I like to ask this question is just because everybody has a different response. It always affects people differently. Some people have felt like it awoke their creative side because they now had time to do all this stuff. But there's also other people where it's just like everything going on has made it really difficult to find inspiration in what I make. But
yeah. So I mean, I think I've definitely fallen on that side a bit. I also practically, now my wife has been working from home for the past year, which, we do have a 2-bedroom apartment. So like have our own spaces to work.
Sure.
But like, there's just in general, then there just becomes, more thing like I can just go out and talk to my wife for a while,
right?
You know what I mean? Where like at least before it was just like, okay, these are the hours I'm gonna work.
Yeah.
I think any sort of work from home, for better and for worse, I think there's benefits to it. Is like you don't need to do all your work from 9 to 5.
Right.
But that does mean your hours of operation are extended, which is good and bad.
Right.
So I guess my point in it is like, I think for some people, this has given them an opportunity to have maybe a little more time.
Right.
I mean, I know a lot of friends who had kind of stopped doing stuff on their channel just because, they were working full-time jobs.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't have, they didn't have as much time to do stuff. But now without it for a while and without working full-time jobs, like, they're like, okay, well, what else am I going to do?
Right.
I love making videos, so I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about
so
like
that hasn't been it, for me, because this was my job hasn't changed
right
at all from this. Just my work environment has.
Sure.
Which is that now there's less structure, I suppose.
Right. Well, and have you found that you've been consuming more like escapism content in a sense, or have you found you've been watching like less of it, or in general, what's your like media intake kind of been?
Yeah, we've been watching a lot of dumb shows, which like my wife and I always, we always have some show we're watching.
Sure.
But I think in the past it's been like, all right, what's the best show we can? Breaking Bad, people love that. Let's watch that.
Right.
Kind of these heavier prestige shows. But then we're like, all right, One Tree Hill, let's go. Like,
Right. The standards have almost shifted a little bit.
yeah, we're watching The Bachelor a bunch.
Right.
Yeah, it's just like, so I guess in that regard, it's my interest to to watch a serious drama is like, I'm good. Like I'm gonna watch to see if this dude gives this girl a rose. That
Right.
sounds like where my brain's at.
I think
right
that's
now.
the ultimate form of escapism is watching Bachelor.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Where, yeah, and not to get too heavy on the takes, I think one reason a lot of people didn't like The Last of Us Part 2 is like it came out at literally the worst time in the world, right?
Right.
It came out in June when there's tons of unrest. It came out just like a few months into COVID. No one wants a story about the end of the world. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just like, and I know there's other reasons people didn't like it, but I think people weren't going to be receptive to it.
Right.
I found myself, I ended up liking it, but I get why people
Right.
didn't want to experience a
Meanwhile,
game like that.
something
And-
like Animal Crossing comes out at the perfect time.
and everyone plays
Right.
it. Yeah.
That's the level of escapism they were looking for. Right.
So I'd say in that regard of like, certainly I've still played some heavy games and I've still watched some heavy shows and all that. But yeah, things that I seek out is more of, I think that's a thought that maybe I hadn't put together, is things that I'm seeking out to watch and experience are like, all right, what's the dumbest thing
Right.
I can entertain myself with right now?
Yeah. I mean, and that's fair too. I had Cheratomo on here, and she was mentioning how she's been watching a lot more movies that are just absolutely ridiculous because it invokes more excitement right now than watching something that's structured and like you said, dramatic and understanding. So yeah, I could definitely see that. But 2020 is over and we're hopefully heading towards better places this year. And I hope that inspiration continues to rise for your content. And I think with that, we should actually probably start wrapping up. Raz, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. And I thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be here. Would you care to plug anything you would like to plug or give people an idea as to where they can find you?
Yeah. You can find me on YouTube, mostly just Razbuten. Hopefully that'll be enough.
You're not going to spell out the URL for us?
Yeah. RAZ.
HTTPS. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you're also...
I guess if you want some mild to hot takes, I have a Twitter, the Razbuten, because at Razbuten was already taken by someone who hasn't posted on it.
He's my
in
next
like 8
guest.
years.
I'm bringing him on next.
Finally.
Yeah.
Tell me how it goes for
Yeah,
Shane.
sure.
But yeah. And then I guess Twitch, if you're interested in that too. All Razbuten, all of it's Razbuten. If you see a guy with a purple background and shirt and a bag on his head, you've
probably found the right
come
place.
to the right place.
If
Yeah.
it's not the right place, you better run. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you guys for supporting me. If you'd like to check out any of these in more concise clips, they're of course uploaded on my YouTube channel. And then of course you can subscribe if you'd like to check out more clips and podcasts coming here eventually. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time. So long.